The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports. You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Before we get to Jeremiah Smith in general, Jeff, I want to open up with you because when I think about this game, watching this game, I was a person that picked Ohio State to lose. I would go right out and say it. I was wrong. People are going to rip me for it. I don't care. I got a job to call the game like I see it. I thought Ohio State was going to go into the game and walk away with an L. They walked away with a W. And they showed up today in a way that I was not expecting. Ryan Day said we're going to be explosive. We're going to go to our go-to guys early and often. And Oregon didn't have an answer. All year long, Oregon had answers for every team. Today Ohio State had answers for everything Oregon threw at them. And that's kind of my biggest thing right now is Ohio State's finding ways to have answers when they're facing really big teams in the playoff.
Yeah, and what are we talking about here? What you're really talking about, and this is the biggest criticism of Ohio State across the board, across the country, coaching. Here's what they did. They obviously watched film. They obviously found what they felt. Oregon's a really good team. Let's not lose that in this game, that Oregon is a good team. That's what's so impressive about this win by Ohio State. They coached well, and Ohio State did something that this defense is built to do two things. It's built to pressure with 4, and it's built to have a lead. And when they went up 14, and then they were able to get pressure with Sawyer and JTT, who, Jay and I have criticized up and down and in between some of the praise for 4 years. That's when everybody, fans and neutral viewers and everything thought, well, Oregon's in trouble. And it never let up. They had Gabriel looking at his feet and looking ahead instead of just playing comfortable down the field. And Oregon, and Ohio State's defensive backs, honestly covered better. They learned their lesson and didn't try to challenge them on the outside. And Caleb Downs played, a historic game. If you go back and just watch him, it was really basically what Ohio State was built to do. They actually did in this game. And that's why they came out with the W.
Barrett, same thing going to you. I've been thinking about Ohio State. I've been really questioning Ryan Day's coaching at sometimes this year, Chip Kelly's coaching. Really, first part of the year, the defense, Jeff and I did shows discussing how the defense at times are just not doing the things that they're doing later in the year. Biggest takeaway for you from this game, mine was just Ohio State had answers, but what's your biggest takeaway right now after the game is over?
Well, to me, it's that Ohio State's ceiling is higher than anybody in the country by far. But I think the more important thing is that the floor is way higher now than it was, a month ago. I think, it's one thing to do what they did to Tennessee because that matchup was sort of known. It wasn't, everyone sort of had tape on Tennessee. And even though Ohio State had played Oregon before, they're different teams. That's half a season ago. And so being able to play at that level against an opponent that has had plenty of time to study you, to get ready to get healthy, I should say. It's massive. I mean, it's massive for Ohio State to go out there and say, hey, look, what we showed is not who we are. Ryan Day to basically, put the pieces back together and say, hey, look, we're going to go be that dynamic offense. We're going to remember that Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka are real people on a roster that you can actually use. And get back to the rushing attack. Because that rushing, you guys know this better than I do, but that rushing attack has it's been really good at times. And then it's like, well, what the hell? Where are you? It seems like that changed. They stayed true to their identity. And, Jeff, you mentioned when that defense, when they get a lead, that defense is built for situations like that. And to get off to hot starts in the 2 biggest games of the season is a big step moving forward, especially considering I think they're going to have the easier path to the national championship game of the other 2 participants.
Yeah, they're almost going backwards in this path. Again, just like the last game against Tennessee, Barry, you said a couple great things there about that game. We knew what we were going to get. And that's how it played out. This one, no, I don't care who it is. Nobody saw this coming. Nobody saw Oregon being confused. And I watched a lot of the Sky Cam, because I like to watch the safe defensive backs. And Ohio State again played their defense and just played it very well. But like you said, through the year, no, the rushing attack has not been there at all. They break big ones against, well, most teams are lesser than Ohio State. And I don't mean as an insult. Right. But most of the time,
every team,
and they break the 60-yarders, and then they get a bunch of 2 and 3 yarders, and then the athletes bail them out. Me and Jay talk just repetitively about the athletes always bail Ohio State out. Offensive line, is the MVP of this game. I mean, they played great. They really have built themselves since the Oregon game. I mean, that's when this offensive line, had to become something different. As much criticism as they've received, man, they played great. It looked good on film. And then when that works, everything works. There was actually I thought there were some running lanes out there that because of Oregon's defensive line made some really good, last second plays. There was some gaping holes out there that I thought any minute's going to break, and a couple of them did. But especially when Judkins was in, I don't know if there's I wouldn't be smart enough to know if there's a different blocking type for Judkins, but I don't know how many times I said, like, this is the one, and they kept a shoestring here or there, and it really kept it from breaking open. And then so it was just, I don't know. Again, it just all came together. This is the team that we were promised in July. And it came together for this game. We thought it was for the Tennessee game, but now I realize, no, this is the game this team was built for. And, it was really something to see as a fan. From the fan side of it, this was awesome.
So, Jeff, you made a comment there about this is a team we're finally getting to see, and it's made for this moment. Ryan Day made a very specific coaching decision this year to kind of slow roll this thing, to do more huddling this year, to do a more methodical approach to the offense. We saw more 7-play, 10-play, 12-play drives that we don't normally see. All of a sudden in this game, 3 plays, touchdown. 3 plays, touchdown. What was it, a 1-play touchdown to Travion Henderson on the run up the right sideline? Yeah. And I think there's a benefit to both. I see the benefit to Ryan Day saying 7, 10, 12-play scoring drives. You're going to need these down the road. I also see a benefit of quickly scoring against Oregon, because I think in this kind of game, we talk about getting up early here, and maybe it was someone on the broadcast talking about all of the teams that they got the bye. They got down early because the teams that came in that played that last game, I think they kind of had a little umph in them, and they already had some momentum coming off that last game. And Ryan Day kind of felt that and realized we need to get up on Oregon fast, because Oregon can score quickly. And being able to get up and score quickly might help you today. It helped today, but it may help you down the road as the Buckeyes' quest to win a national championship continues.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And you mentioned, like, the biggest thing for Oregon is they have their game plan, right? They still want to run the ball first and work off play action. They do it in a different way, obviously. But you look at, in a situation like that, when you as an offense try to score quickly and sort of, be the snake, be the aggressor, you can get your opponent out of their game plan quickly. And that's exactly what happened. I'm looking at the stats right now. James only had 7 carries. Whittington had 6 for 3 total yards. Obviously, Dylan Gabriel, the sack yardage gets factored in there as well. They had negative 23 as a team, but that's not who Oregon is. Dylan Gabriel's not supposed to throw the ball 41 times. That's just not supposed to happen against anybody. So the balance was off. And I think because Ohio State was able to land those heavyweight, those punches quickly, those haymakers kept going. Like I was at the Peach Bowl, and we come back up in the press conference, and it's all quiet. We're supposed to be professional in the press box, right? I look at the score. I'm like, holy shit, it's 30-0. Where did that come from? And I think Dan Lanning probably thought the same thing. He's like, this is not how it's supposed to roll. So I think you had him in a corner from the get-go, and that is a credit to Chip Kelly, that offense, the game plan for to have I would say the guts to go out and let it rip in a big spot, and it worked. And man, they dictated the style, and styles make fights, and Oregon was not ready for that style.
Yeah, and all credit for to Ohio State for and they said it on the broadcast, but again, as you guys know how it is. I don't know, whatever team you watch the closest, you watch a team become who they are now, whether that's bad or good or whatever. We watched Jeremiah Smith become start figuring things out and become a monster. This is not the same guy that Oregon played in that first matchup. That guy was really good. This guy was something different. The confidence, the physicality. I know I'm gonna, we'll have plenty of time to praise Will Howard here in a minute. What a great game he played as a quarterback. But just for Ohio State to know what they had in practice, me and Jay again say all the time, what was Ryan Day watching in practice? Why did he think this? They knew what they had in practice, and they knew the advantages they had in some of the, the physicality and the man-on-man matchups, and they used them. Again, defensive line did a great job of making Gabriel play from the pocket and making him worry. And another thing they did, and this, I think this gets lost in another, it did get brought up one time on the podcast, but is that when Ohio State was tackling people, it just seemed a little meaner. And there was always one, it was all clean, but it was always one or two guys landing on Gabriel when they got tackled. They weren't pushing out of bounds. They were tackling him and landing on him. And that wears on a team. And I really thought they did a good job being physical. I thought they did a great job with the defensive line rotations. I mean, this is the best coaching job that we have saw the Ryan Day coaching staff do since he's been here. I promise everybody that first half. The second half was about hanging on and not losing. And they made some mistakes. And I think Lanning actually, I joked about it in our little chat. I thought he coached a great game. He stayed calm, and he punted in the second half there. And I'm like, wow, what is he doing? And I said, wait a minute.
Waving the white flag. That's not like him either.
Yeah, no. I said, but the one time I said, you know what, Jeff? I said, he's way smarter than you. Let's see what happens. Sure enough, we get the one holding call of the game. I won't even go into that because it's just not worth it. It was a weird called game anyway. And so they get the ball back, and next thing you know, a quick touchdown. And I'm like, he stayed calm. And I mean, then it kind of got away from him. But I was like, he actually kind of kept his team thinking about a possible comeback. I mean, I know I was. So credit to that Oregon coaching staff. They're awesome. That team was really good.
They didn't give up. And, I was driving back and I was listening to the national broadcast, when they went for it on 4th and 5, whatever it was at the end of the first half and scored. And the radio guy, the play-by-play Kesher was saying Lanning's definitely going to kick a field goal. They just need punts. And I'm like, no, he's going to go for it. That's how Dan operates. And, going into halftime, you could sense, at least I could sense through the radio driving home that there was some momentum. Yeah. And then for them to come out and score right out of the gate in the first drive, it's not, when it's 34-0, you don't expect there to be a comeback, but it's like watching Dumb and Dumber, right? When Mary Swanson says 1 in a million and Lloyd Christmas says, so you're telling me there's a chance?
Yeah. And you're correct.
It was legit.
And to fill you in, I know because you were busy today, you might not have got to see it. So the last Buckeye drive of the first half, there was about 4 minutes left on the clock, if I remember correct. And they were running effectively. They were moving. We were all like, run some time off, kick a field goal. They wound up getting a field goal. But what was lost, there was two plays in a row. They took shots into the end zone that were incompletions and basically handed Oregon. Well, you know how it is. They handed them 80 seconds on the clock.
Yeah.
And Oregon scores at the end of the first half with no time on the clock. And when they took those shots to the end zone, I look over at my wife and she gets tired of hearing it. And I'm like, that was a coaching mistake. That was the one thing you couldn't give them was time. And it wasn't a realistic shot. It was atypical of what Howard and the guys do. And it was weird. It just looked like it was like the two most abnormal plays of the game. But again, and then Lanning does his thing, goes down there. And here's what I tell everybody, you guys watch enough football. I'm like, people actually text me at halftime, had the nerve to start talking about the Texas game. I'm like, what are you people thinking? Because I always say this, if Ohio State could do that in the first half, there's no reason Oregon couldn't do it in the second half. So, as long as there's the equal time left, anything can happen. So, that's, like I say, credit to Oregon for, fighting a good fight and a great season. Oh yeah. I want to say that it was a fantastic season. I know it's got a stink for them right now and it stings and all that, but it was great.
Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy New Year. Great way to start off the year with an instant classic of a football game. I think if you're Texas, you can say it couldn't have scripted any better at the beginning, couldn't have scripted any worse in the fourth quarter, but in the end, they pulled it out in the fourth quarter. And again, lots to get to, which we will. We've got coming up, we're going to be joined by Barrett Sully, great college football writer as well. But I'll just start here before we get into some of it. We're already getting comments, by the way, too. We want to get your interaction on the comment section. But Coach, you know, as well as I do, if not more, winning a championship is never easy, and there's always going to be bumps and surprises and twists and turns along the way. But in the end, you have to prevail, and you have to fight through those. It's never easy. It's never supposed to be easy, with a few exceptions. And I guess on the positive side, you can say for the Longhorns, in the end, they got the W and they advanced, and they're on to the semifinals, beating Arizona State today in double OT 39-31.
Yeah, to me, it was a first half tale. It was a second half tale. There was an overtime tale. It's difficult to win. The margin for winning and losing when you get in really good games and you get in really tight games is really thin. And I really had thought for a second with Bert Auburn getting a chance to win the game twice for Texas and him not getting it done. It just felt like kind of the tale of the day. I mean, Texas had opportunity after opportunity to kind of land a blow to knock this team out. And when you let good football teams hang around, then they start making a play on you. And then the next thing you know, they believe all of a sudden, hey, we can beat these guys. We can slay the giant. And then they make another play, get themselves in position to go for two, tie the game, and we know what happened. But I think at the end of the day, this is a scenario where Texas it feels like Sark is kind of starting to get towards that culture change that they were looking for in Austin forever. It felt like a Vince Young moment when he, was able to get USC. It was a different – I get it, there was a different storyline there. But at the end of the day, Texas had every opportunity in that overtime really to give it up, and they didn't give it up, got the big fourth down, and I'm sure we'll be going over all that. But I do think, Jeff, that this is a football team that feels like they've got somewhat of some unfinished business from what happened to them last year, and it's good to see that they're going to have an opportunity to continue that journey.
Again, we're getting a lot of comments, and I'll get to those in just a bit. I want to thank everybody for joining us. And again, we want to hear from you and let you be a part of it. I was going to say, Coach, that it's only fitting that this Texas defense would come up and seal the game with that interception in the second OT. But Quinn Ewers in the offense kind of made up for some of their issues with the touchdown and the 2-point try, and those were really good offensive plays. But at the end of the day, this Texas defense has been so great and so dominant. We've talked about that all season long. And even, again, as you always say, everybody has to do their part. Can't be just one-dimensional. Defense has to do their part, but the offense still has to make plays, and you can't beat yourself. And the special teams has to do their part too. Everybody has to be a part and be involved. And fortunately, when they needed the offense to kind of come through after the defense felt like they were on the field the entire game, they were able to pull out the plays and get the win in the double OT.
Yeah, I mean, I go to the start of the football game, and that's that Texas has got a chance to block the punt, and for whatever reason, you know, you coach it from day one, you take it off of his foot, and I don't know if he felt like he was going to get through or wasn't going to get through, and all of a sudden he's there to take it off his foot. He hits the punter, and it gives them a first down, and they end up getting a field goal in that situation. But it almost felt like that was the first big scenario in the football game. And then Texas was able to come right back, score in 2 plays. ASU goes 3 and out. They return the punt, and you're thinking, boy, this is fixing to be a blowout. But like you said, you leave your defense out there. You're off. They weren't able to run the football. I think Texas had 19 yards rushing in the first half. That's to me, it's just, you can't make an excuse for that. And I get it. Sark likes to do all of the, hey, let's make sure we've got the right angles here. He likes to run the outside zone play, but sometimes you got to run right at guys. And I felt like that's what they weren't doing. They weren't getting themselves in position to then play action, which is what makes Quinn Ewers dangerous. And when you weren't able to do that, then you become one-dimensional, and then that's when Arizona State started getting some stops.
Initial reaction is, hey, Penn State got a win. Boise State, they were able to keep Boise State at an arm's length, but it felt like it should have been more of a dominant win.
Hey, it's a good win. We're in uncharted territory no matter what here. When Penn State's up 14-0 early, you're thinking, okay, this is going to kind of get out of hand. They're going to blow them out. And yet Boise scores a touchdown there that would have made it 24-21. Huge hands to the face penalty that negated that touchdown. I mean, that was a gigantic play in the game. I give Boise a lot of credit for their fight. But look, Penn State's got a lot of good players. We're going to talk a lot on this show, I'm sure, about Abdul Carter, because that will be a significant component in the next round. Because Penn State's defense was just not the same without Abdul Carter. Boise really moved the ball pretty well. That's a concern. But look, Penn State's got a lot of good players. It's a good win. And, hey, James Franklin does not lose I was watching the game, guys, with some Penn State fans. One guy was all nervous there. James Franklin does not lose these games. This isn't Ohio State or Michigan. When he's favored by 12, James doesn't lose these kinds of games.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised by the outcome. So far, this has been my best score prediction, spread prediction yet for the college football playoff games we've seen. I thought Penn State would win, cover, and Boise State would be competitive, but you'd always feel like Penn State was the better team and kind of keep them at an arm's length, which is what they did. I think even if that touchdown had made it 24-21, I think that changes the feeling of the game. I don't think it changes the outcome of the game. But Corey, you mentioned that, Abdul Carter went off and it felt different for Penn State's defense. On the one hand, yeah, I agree. On the other hand, they still only give up 14 points. Maddox Madsen had thrown 3 picks all season long. And for those, I'm not in this camp particularly, but for those that are of the belief that, well, Boise State just shouldn't be treated this way because they're playing the Mountain West and it's a higher level of competition, they have a lot of fodder after this game. A lot. Genty is 104 yards on 30 carries. Maddox Madsen throws the same number of picks as he had all season long. They look like a team that was going up against a caliber of opponent that since Oregon, they just hadn't really consistently faced. Now, I am not opposed to Boise State being in this playoff for a couple of reasons. Number one, I value the regular season above all else. And so I would like to see the most deserving teams get in, not who we think are the best. Because I think bowl season has taught us here, guys, just because you think someone's better or you think someone's the best team of a group doesn't mean that they are. Bama lost as a double-digit favorite again. So I'm in favor of that. And number two, I think that Boise State's resume was actually pretty darn good. If you look at UNLV beating them twice, that's not a small thing. I'm not saying it's equivalent to winning the SEC of the Big Ten, but it's not a small thing. They did take the number 1 team down to a game-winning field goal on the road. If Oregon had made an extra point earlier in the game, it actually only would have been a 1-point win for Oregon. Not that that changes the calculus entirely. So I thought Boise deserved to be there. I think this game was closer than the final score indicated, but I'm not surprised by the outcome because Penn State's a better team.
So where, Spencer, let me just get a quick rebuttal from you. Where, and in terms of strength of victory from this, on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you say that you would rate this for Penn State?
If 10 is what's 10 exactly?
Like, in terms of value, the way that they won the game, you're saying, hey, Boise State's from the Mountain West Conference. Should they have been the 3 seed, right? There were some questions because people are going to say that this is a Mickey Mouse playoff run. Okay. And that's what, and you started to allude to that a little bit. I don't want to look just over this Boise State team because I feel like they could have given some problems to some other teams. Penn State just happened to be in a good position to beat this Boise State team. I'm not discounting the Broncos here. They certainly have flaws that wouldn't let them go on a run, but they're going to say, oh, well, Penn State played SMU. Penn State played Boise State. Should they have really made it to the semifinals? So what would you rate this on a scale of 1 to 10 based on the way Penn State performed?
Well, and for that crowd, I'd remind you that Penn State has beaten those opponents by a combined score of 69-24. Like, what does a playoff team look like in that particular setting of this easier
not Alabama
playoff path? Yeah, I mean, excuse me. So I'd probably say this is like on a scale of 1 to 10. This is like a 7-8, like a really good score. Not great, not oh my gosh, best performance ever, because it certainly felt like it could have been more, but it also could have been closer. So I think this is a win you look at and say, yeah, Penn State looks like a team that can go to the national championship game. I don't care if they get Georgia with Gunnar Stockton or Notre Dame as is. I don't see, with the way Penn State is playing, how they can't win that game and play for a national championship, which is not something I would have said about Penn State during the season. But in the last month, they're playing really good football. And their only loss is to the only team in college football who, knock on wood, please don't let this change tomorrow, only team that hasn't lost in the country this year, that being my Oregon Ducks, of course. And they lost by 8 points. And yeah, they were down in that game, but they played really well. They moved the ball on a great defense all game, and they keep moving the ball. So, yeah, I think it's hard to not feel good about Penn State at the moment.
Corey, how much stock are you putting into this win over Penn State? Because the same idea, that's the comments that I'm seeing mainly on X, right? I'm trying to drive this conversation based on what are other people saying. For Penn State, SMU, Boise State, did they deserve to be here? Should they have been seeded as highly? Whatever have you. How much stock do you put in this game when Penn State's really going to get a test? Georgia or Notre Dame, one way or another. I think that's a close game either way, and that's the best opponents that Penn State's going to see since Oregon and Ohio State.
Well, there's two conversations here. One, Penn State did everything it had to do. This is not necessarily even so much a Penn State discussion. I mentioned earlier, kind of half jokingly, but in all seriousness, James does not lose these games. The reason Penn State fans get angry at James is because he loses games against elite teams or teams that have maybe a little bit better talent. They were a 12-point favorite in this game. The question is, should a number 6 seed ever be a 12-point favorite over a number 3 seed? And the answer is unequivocally no. This was botched so badly. There's no way in the world that Boise should be a number 3 seed. I'll give Boise credit. I don't take anything away from Penn State. This system has to be fixed. You cannot have Boise be a number 3 seed and be a 12-point underdog, and get a bye. But again, that's a different conversation. Penn State, from the Penn State side, the reason James doesn't lose these kind of games, we can joke all we want, Zach, and a lot of people maybe do about the 1-0 mentality, but there are a lot of schools around the country that don't have a 1-0 mentality. All right, they get up for the big games and then they shrink for the small games. And to James's credit, I think the single best thing that he does as a coach is he gets his players ready to play every single game. And for that reason, you don't lose to SMU. You don't lose to Boise. Whether they lose to Georgia or Notre Dame, that's a different discussion. But Penn State's in this position because, quite frankly, they got unbelievably lucky. I think it was tremendous that they lost the Big Ten championship game. Rather than playing Ohio State tomorrow, they played Boise State today. So, but again, that's a different discussion that the college football playoff has got to get fixed.
And their fans got treated to a home playoff game.
Yeah.
I mean, even if it had been a hard-fought win, Penn State's going, good thing we didn't win that conference championship game. That would have been a mess.
Yep.
Get ready to tackle the NFL with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, you live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. And the Sugar Bowl today presents an interesting line. The point spread has changed a lot over the last week, and right now, Georgia is the underdog. FanDuel has Notre Dame as 1.5-point favorites over Georgia. The Bulldogs will have their backup quarterback playing, which seems like it's the reason the spread has gone against them. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Who would have thunk it? Week 18 and the Lions and Vikings going for 15 wins.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Biggest regular season game, some Luke are saying, in the history of the league. Do you buy?
In the history of this matchup?
Do you buy
that's a bit much, but I'm sure there have been other ones. But I was thinking back. I mean, I feel like I've said this every time we've talked this year, Matt. But the fact that this matchup is so colossal, just like 3 years ago, this would have been on the 9th slot on Fox at 1 p.m. Eastern. Like,
would have been
we would have. Yeah, they would have been pulling up college announcers. I mean, this is nothing. This used to be nothing, this sleepy thing. But now it's this marquee matchup, and it's Vikings-Lions. It wasn't supposed to be this, and I love that. These two dome teams in the NFC North. But yeah, like this is by far the most, and maybe even the only time that there's been like a possibly season-defining Vikings-Lions game. Like if whichever of these teams loses, if they go one and done in the playoffs because they got to go on the road and play like Baker Mayfield, and that's tough, this will be the game that is seen as the one that defines the season. As, man, they were looking right at it, but they just couldn't get past their rivals. And I can't remember a time when either team's season came down to a Vikings-Lions game. It's always been, there's been plenty of times where it came down to a Lions-Packers game or a Vikings-Bears game or Vikings-Packers, but I can't think of a time when this was more than just another one in the regular season. I think that's beautiful.
The game, what game was it? Well, it wasn't at the end of the year, but the Golden Tate somersault into the end zone game had some meaning years ago.
That was week 4, 2017, I think.
Yeah. Well,
it was, the Vikings were 13-3, and that was one of the 3.
Yes, but nothing like this. I agree with you.
No.
And the Lions and Vikings have played some, like you're right, some stinker week 18s, week 17s have not mattered, and it's awesome. It is so much fun. How do the Vikings get this done, Luke? How do you see it that they go in there and win? What do they have to do?
Yeah, I think it's your P's and Q's on offense, right? Like everybody sees what has happened to this Lions defense. There's a lot of tape on it, and I think you'd be crazy if you didn't think the Vikings were going to be able to move the ball here. But you look at the other side. And this Lions offense has had the keys to Flores. They have owned this defense in the past few games. But it's every time you get back in the ring, it's harder and harder and harder to repeat it because the Vikings are going to have a different answer this time. They know that what they brought to the last few doesn't work. They're not going to just bring the same. So if the Vikings can get Jared Goff uncomfortable, which they have not been able to do. Goff's been getting the ball out totally untouched in all of these games. And interestingly, they didn't really blitz in that last game. And this is a stat I know you're not going to get anywhere else. That cover 0 look that the Vikings have with everybody strung out on the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
The Lions were the one team that they barely ran it against. They ran it twice in that game. That's as little as any other game this whole year. They didn't use it. And maybe that's because they thought the Lions could beat it. Maybe they just thought they had a different idea. But maybe they bring that a little bit more this time. Maybe they still don't. And that is a sign of respect, by the way. The teams that they have brought it the most against are like the Titans and teams with rookie quarterbacks, like the Bears. But against the Lions, they didn't feel like that was the way to go. So did they go away from what they wanted last time? And that's why the Lions were able to score, on 4 straight long, sustained touchdown drives. Maybe. And then they got to kind of figure that out. But if the Vikings can get those disruptions, force those turnovers the Lions have been so good at avoiding, and prevent themselves from that like turnover avalanche that seems to happen in all of these Lions games where, they they get up by a score or two, and then suddenly there's a turnover, and then it's a 3-score game, and then you're just chasing it the whole time. You got to avoid that little sequence, that avalanche. And the Vikings have given that avalanche to other teams. So if one of those happens to one of these teams, that could be the key. Just who gets that nice streak, that one, that crazy quarter where you're going out of it and all of your beat reporters are tweeting about how much of a disaster that quarter was. Or will this be a little bit more back and forth and stay on the knife's edge for the whole time?
Yeah, I mean, I really, truly see this as a track meet. I think, number one, Dan Campbell, I think this is for Coach of the Year. I think the winner of this game wins Coach of the Year.
Maybe. Although those odds are off of FanDuel already, so I think it might already be a little decided, but perhaps.
So I think Dan Campbell's still got to be himself in this game. And if there's an opportunity for 3, but he knows right now our defense isn't getting it done and I got to go for it, just still be yourself. That, number one, is a key for me. Number two, I said it earlier. There's 2 guys out there right now that could get flagged for being too, overhyped in this game. And that's Darius Smith,
discipline,
who's always out for blood against the Vikings, as he thought he got screwed over by them and Green Bay. And like I said, Robertson and Jefferson, I think is going to be just a knockdown, drag out street fight, those two. So
are they going to man it up? Are they going to leave that matchup to happen, or is this going to be more of like a zone thing?
I think Aaron Glenn's who he is. I think he loves man, and I think he wants to put his guys. Look, Justin Jefferson in a zone where he gets the ball and goes could be scary too.
Yeah, like the Lions play without fear.
So good.
Like that's the Dan Campbell thing. They play without fear, and everybody else has played with fear against the Vikings. When you play with fear and you contract and you do a bunch of perimeter screens and you try to, live in your quick game and off defensively, you bracket Justin Jefferson because you're scared of him. Everything that the other teams do that plays into the Vikings' hand, they do out of fear. And the Lions say, all right, Justin, you can get your 150. But we're going to try to win the game anyways. That has been, I've gone on these crossovers all season, Matt, and I've said, well, here's how the Lions did it. So maybe you want to go take that. I think that's the reason the Lions have become so good is that lack of fear. And I do think that it sort of neutralizes some of the stuff that's worked so well for the Vikings all season.
And I'll say, no, I think you're spot on, Luke. And I think the biggest, another key just real fast is ball control. The Lions offensive line is so damn good. And if they can push Minnesota around a little bit, Gibbs, Craig Reynolds, Jamar Jefferson, the 3 backs that they used and utilized well Monday night, can keep Minnesota and the guys we talked about, Addison and Hawk and Jefferson and Darnold off the field, Aaron Jones, that'll be a plus. The Lions have to continue to run the football and do what they do. Do you have a prediction? Do you think your boys are going to do this?
I have no idea. The over-under is insane. This game is going to be insane. I know better than to try to predict it.
I know.
I will say, I'll give you one more key though, to this one. And that is how the Vikings align their safeties. Last game, they aligned their safeties in a lot of too high. They love to align too high. They do this all the time. And to some degree, this happens to them in every game where teams will run the ball a little bit because they got to get a safety to fill in the alley and they can find the gap. That's the safety's gap. That works a little bit. They basically accept that as a cost of doing business for the coverages that they do. But the Lions really took advantage of it in that first game. So if the Vikings can either do better out of too high run fits, which is a little bit like saying, well, why didn't you just win more games? Like way easier said than done. Or do they kind of bite that bullet, get Harrison Smith in the box a little more, get Josh Metellus in the box a little more and try to fit these things up a little bit stronger? Since the last time we played, there's been a sort of breakout of an unknown guy named Jalen Redmond. He's good for a couple of really awesome, like knifing TFLs a game. So maybe he becomes a different thing, but that might be a key to slowing down this run game. I think the only thing that feels obvious is that the Vikings offense will work, and the Lions offense has worked the last few games. So it feels like this is going to be a bit of a track meet. If it's not, then somebody, either Aaron Glenn or Brian Flores, figured something out.
Lions going for the season series sweep, of course, winning in week 7, as Luca talked about before, on a Jake Bates field goal at the Horn. I'm going to keep my prediction also for later on in the week. I'm with you. I have no idea either, but I'll tell you this.
I don't need to try to guess I don't need to tell you in advance what's going to happen. You want to sit down and watch this game. Why would I spoil it?
Ford Field's going to be rocking. It's going to be crazy.
Oh yeah.
And I can't.
And the All Blacks.
That's what it sounds like. The Lions.
Yeah, they tweeted the Lions.
They were going to wear
official account tweeted
old throwbacks, but it sounds like they're going to go to the black, and we'll see what that does. If they lose this game in those black uniforms, I can guarantee you never see them again.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's so cursed.
Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
Steelers Bengals rematch, and there's lots of playoff stakes on the line.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
It's been like, a month or so since the last time we did this, and these teams have taken some different directions since then, but both have playoff stakes on the line. The Bengals need to win to have a hope to get into the playoffs. They would need some help after this game, but the Steelers, they are in the playoffs, but they need to win this game. One, if the Ravens somehow lose to the Browns, don't think that's happening. Then the Steelers could a Steelers win would win the division, but a Steelers win also guarantees them they would be no lower than the 5th seed, which would match them up with the Houston Texans, who I think we can all kind of agree are the weakest of the division leaders right now in the AFC.
Yeah, I think so. I think the Bengals and the Steelers would love to play the Texans in round one. Obviously, it's not possible for the Bengals, but the Steelers are playing for that. And by the way, I don't think anyone here in Cincinnati, some fans probably, but thought that Mike Tomlin would rest starters this week. Even if they know, no, why would you? I would much rather play Houston in Houston than have to go on the road and deal with Baltimore or go on the road really and play anyone else not named the Houston Texans. I think that they're clearly the worst playoff team in the AFC. I guess you could debate it if the Dolphins get in. I'm not going to debate it. I look at that and I'm like, man, Houston's playing at a really poor level. But you're right. I think Bengals wise, what a 180 it's been since December 1st when you were here in Cincinnati versus now with the Bengals going up to Pittsburgh.
It's such a 180. I mean, you look at these two teams since that game, the Bengals lost to the Steelers. They have won all 4 of their games since then, beating the Cowboys, Titans, Browns, and Broncos, handling their business to make it done. And it's kind of crazy. I don't know if you've been watching Hard Knocks. I've been watching all the episodes, and you go back to around the time when that Steelers game happened, I think the first episode, in fact, and you see Zach Taylor put up like, hey, our playoffs start now. We have to win these games to have a shot at the playoffs. And they lost that Steelers game, but they have won. They put themselves in the conversation for the playoffs, which, around that time after they lost that Steelers game, I marked the Bengals out. I was like, they're toast. There's no way they can get back in it. And listen, they could still win this game and not be in it, but they deserve credit for fighting back, not letting this season fall away and making this season come down to the last game.
Yeah, I think had you told me on December 1st at 5:00 Eastern time that, oh, hey, I know they just lost 44-38, but they're going to be in it till the end, I'd be like, get out of here. Get out of here. This game, this team, they can't beat anyone. They can't win close games. And they've done that. They went on the road and won 2 games after that. And then they came home and beat a division rival. And I get it. It's a bad Browns team. But then they beat a good Denver team. And I do think that that's a good team. And so it's like, all right, well, now you have a chance. And I think it's a mixture. It's, oh, man, I can't believe they have a chance despite how they played earlier in the year. And a lot of people have looked at it, including myself. And it's like, oh, well, if you hadn't lost by 6 to New England in week 1 or lost by 1 to the Ravens or lost in overtime to the Ravens at home when you had no business losing to that game or lose to the Steelers where you come out pretty lackluster early on in that game with your season on the line, especially on defense. And there's so many of those games, the Chargers game, there's so many of these 1-score games. And it's like, well, yeah, that's why you're 8-8. That's why they need help this week. Had they won any of those games, they wouldn't need help. They would just need to win and be in. Instead, they have to play their way in and get some help as well.
Yeah, they do need some help. The Steelers, Here's the thing. I know that there's probably some people out there, wait, why aren't the Steelers resting their guys, using this as a bye week? And I think a big part of people don't understand, the Steelers haven't played good football for almost a month. Since that Bengals win, they're 1-3. Their one win being over the Browns. They did have a rough stretch, sure. 3 games in 11 days. And whereas other teams had to go through that, no other teams had a high win total count in those opponents, like at the Eagles, at the Ravens, and then at home against the Kansas City Chiefs. That's a tough stretch for anybody to haul, and they did not handle that well. I think of importance for the Steelers in this game, as much as winning to get to Houston is, if they can win this game, they guarantee themselves Houston as long as the Ravens don't win, and then they would win the division. I think just important for the Steelers is getting back to playing your style of football, which you might not have seen this. Well, I think they did. They played their style of football against the Browns. They handled them on December 8th. But getting the ball to George Pickens, being a turnover, first defense, protecting the football, those are things the Steelers can do and have done several times. In fact, for most of this season. But I think it's imperative for this team, especially with a lot of the new pieces, including Russell Wilson, including some of the rookies that are starting on the offensive line. It's imperative for them to put that work out in front of themselves and say, hey, we can get back to this before they play the playoffs, whether it's the Texans, the Ravens, or whoever else.
Yeah, and honestly, it's a good point. I think this is going to be the most difficult. The Bengals have won 4 straight. If they make it 5 straight, certainly the most difficult of the 5 is this game against a team that clearly needs to figure out how to right the ship. They want to right the ship going into the playoffs, regardless of who they play. Obviously, you would much rather play the Texans. So if you win, you can put yourself in position to do that. And you want to go in with a little momentum. And that's why I think, and we talked about this a few minutes prior to recording, if you're the Bengals, you're going in with all the momentum if you can find your way in. But you have to overcome the biggest hurdle, which is going on the road, primetime. It's their 5th road primetime game this year. That's an NFL record. No team has had to do that. Go on the road 5 times in primetime. So you have to go on the road, division rival, AFC North road primetime games. Very rarely does the road team win. It's a weird thing in the AFC North that has happened. And so it's a tough environment, obviously. Stakes on the line for the Steelers. It's a really nice test, I think, to end the regular season or potentially end the season. And regardless of what happens around them, it's a big game for the Bengals. They can go into the offseason or into the playoffs with their 4th straight, winning record, which matters. I know Mike Tomlin talks about that all the time. Bengals winning, posting a winning record for 4 straight years. They've only done that once in team history. That's from 2011 to 2015 with Andy Dalton. To do it last year with losing Joe, and then to do it this year where they were 4-8, I do think that would matter. So yeah, we'll see if they can do that. Obviously, playoffs are on the line, but that mark is a big one as well.
Get ready to tackle the NFL with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, you live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. And the Sugar Bowl today presents an interesting line. The point spread has changed a lot over the last week, and right now, Georgia is the underdog. FanDuel has Notre Dame as 1.5-point favorites over Georgia. The Bulldogs will have their backup quarterback playing, which seems like it's the reason the spread has gone against them. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
The Denver Broncos are in a win and in situation in Week 18, but a couple of Carsons for the Kansas City Chiefs are going to try to steal their playoff hopes.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
The Denver Broncos defense needs to bounce back in a significant way, and the offense needs to limit mistakes and find a way to pull through in a pressure-packed situation. We're going to break down some key storylines from Denver's side of things on this Crossover Thursday edition. Locked on Broncos, Locked on Chiefs, and this Crossover Thursday is brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks. As always, want to say thank you to every single one of you that makes Locked on Broncos and Locked on Chiefs your first listen of the day. Every single day, we really appreciate every single one of you for rocking with us. You know, your boys Cody and Sarah will have you over there Locked on Broncos, and Chris and Ryan got you covered Locked on Chiefs all year round. And hopefully, Chris, for both of us, and I don't know that necessarily you guys really care about the Broncos making the playoffs, but hopefully from our side of things, both of these teams will be in the NFL postseason here. I don't know that anybody really wants the Cincinnati Bengals backing their way in. That'd be kind of interesting from the rest of the NFL's perspective or from the entertainment perspective, but from Denver's side of things in this, you mentioned it before, the pressure is on. And I think that's the most important thing that we're looking at here from the Broncos' vantage point. Can this team bounce back after 2 straight losses? Now, throughout the course of the season, we've seen Denver do exactly that. They lose a game or two. They come back. Specifically, we can go back to the last game against Kansas City, where they were in Kansas City. You lose an absolute heartbreaker in the worst possible fashion. You and I haven't even got a chance to chat about that since that happened. That was devastating. But then the Broncos ripped off 4 straight wins right after that game. So this team does have some mental fortitude, but can they do it against a lot of guys that they've probably not got any film on this season?
It's funny because had Denver won that game, and obviously things go differently throughout the season, regardless, but had Denver won that game, this game matters to Kansas City, and they can't rest their starters. They're playing everybody because then they have to worry about the Buffalo Bills getting the number 1 seed, because at that point they'd be 14-2. So, that loss changed everything for Kansas City. And heartbreaking is one way to put it. I mean, obviously I figured they lost. Like I literally was watching that game. I was getting ready to come downstairs to record the the post game. And I'm like, okay, well, they lost because chip shot field goal. And obviously that happens. I mean, in Kansas City, has had some weird things this year. They block a kick. They had 3 different kickers kick a game-winning field goal for him. I 100% agree with you. I don't want to see the Cincinnati Bengals in the playoffs. But I know Cincy fans will say that I'm hating on them for that, but it is what it is. I think it would be good for the AFC West, though, for the Chargers, who are already in the playoffs, the Chiefs that are in the playoffs, and the Broncos to make the playoffs. I think that's great for the AFC West to have 3 teams in the playoffs.
Yeah, I can't remember. I'll have to go back and check the receipts on this. I know we did our AFC West preview at the beginning of the season. I think a couple of us in that AFC West preview kind of talked about the fact that, man, maybe 3 teams in this division could be really good this year. And it's turned out to be the case. I mean, 3 teams with 9+ victories, 3 teams with winning records. That's the AFC West ain't getting talked about too much as the best division in football. Thankfully, there's the NFC North takes the pressure off in a way there. But man, it's kind of funny to see how these teams have bounced back after. Remember, just a couple of years ago, it was, oh, well, Russell Wilson and Derek Carr are joining, or the Russell Wilson's joining the AFC West. You got all these, head coach quarterback combos. Everything could be awesome, and it's just completely shifted as teams have rebuilt. The Chargers getting Jim Harbaugh, and now Denver having Sean Payton and Bo Nix, and the Raiders just kind of drifting into anonymity at this point, which is fine by us over here at our respective shows. But
too.
Yeah, it's good. So we talked about the defense hopefully returning to form. They've been absolutely terrible the last 4 weeks, and it's been a lot of either busted coverage or you go up against Cincinnati last week, Chris, and obviously that's one of the best passing attacks in the NFL, so not a whole lot you can do about that. They're going to get theirs. It's just kind of can you outscore them? Can you outlast them? That's been the story of their season thus far. Offensively for the Denver Broncos, I think one of the biggest storylines to look for here against the Chiefs is, can you limit mistakes and can you find a way to extend drives? That's going to be crucial because the Broncos have been very much hit or miss on 3rd down, a lot more miss than hit. Obviously, that's kind of to be expected when, number 1, you don't run the ball well, and number 2, you've got a rookie quarterback out there.
Yeah, and I think, not to take away from what this game means or what this game is, but I think the other big thing for me is, Denver needs this type of game just to be in it and to get the experience. And I know I kind of said that when it comes to the pressure, but it also is the experience level of a playoff level atmosphere, which is what this is going to be. And Denver has a lot of young players, or a lot of players that have been in Denver for years and never really experienced this. So this is going to be completely new to them. So regardless of how this turns out, whether or not they make the playoffs, which I think that they probably will, and whether or not they actually get a win in the playoffs, it's a win for Denver because you're getting that experience to move up to the next level, and players are going to start to understand what that's going to take.
And a lot of these guys have been in games with some stakes. I mean, we could go back to last year where they played in Houston and they had an opportunity to really make a case for the postseason. And you go 0 for 13 on third downs. You throw an interception in the end zone to lose the game. Then you had a situation even against the New England Patriots last year on Christmas Eve, you blow that game against Bailey Zappi, which has a lot of Broncos fans having nightmares right now about facing another backup quarterback this coming week. And I think that now you look at this team with 2 straight games against the Chargers. You had an 11-point lead in the second half. You blew it. You had an opportunity to go for 2 at the end of regulation against the Bengals. You didn't take it. You got to overtime, but then in overtime, you blew it. You had 2 possessions in overtime. Yeah. Couldn't even get a first down. So you're right. This Broncos team being in these spots, like there's guys like Cortland Sutton and Garrett Bowles who have really not ever experienced throughout their NFL careers, been in the league since 2017, 2018. They've never experienced these things. Then you've got the young guys who are none the wiser, having never been in these situations at all. And then you've got some of the other veterans they've brought in, like Mike McGlinchey, Ben Powers, players who have been in these types of big games. It should make for a very interesting sort of melding pot as you go, into this final week with everything on the line in Kansas City kind of playing with house money.
Yeah, and I mean, let's not forget, not only did they get the ball twice, but they got a blessing because the Bengals kicker missed a field goal. I mean, you get a field goal blocked against Kansas City, and then later on you have a Bengals kicker hit the upright, which would have sealed them being in the playoffs a week before, and then it would have really changed how this game would have had to play probably. So, you look at this, and I think it's going to be intriguing from the Broncos' perspective, because you're right, they have to win, but they also have to do it in a way that is smart. They don't want to show everything. They have to win, and if they have to pull more stuff out, they have to pull more stuff out. But you want to hold stuff back for the playoffs if you can. So it's going to be a give and take on both sides. I mean, Kansas City, I think, is going to come out and play very vanilla, and they're going to try to see what they got in their young guys. And you made a great point earlier. Denver's going to be coming in and not knowing what some of these young guys can do. That's a problem too, because you don't know exactly who you're going to be facing, one, and how you're going to be facing this Chiefs offense and defense.
It's going to be fascinating to see how it all plays out in Week 18. The Denver Broncos and the Kansas City Chiefs taking each other on